Good evening, everyone. I bring greetings from the bordering countries to Russia. When I was a kid, my Estonian family never watched TV. Not because they disliked TV shows, but because Soviet TV was pure zombie propaganda. Finland was my other homeland, and when we got back to Finland, after visiting my Estonian family, switching on the television was one of the first things we did. It was like opening a window, and I can still smell that moment when my lungs were filled with free air, though I wouldn't have used that word at the time, free. Calling Soviet reality not free wasn't something one ought to do if you wanted your family members to be able to keep on living behind the Iron Curtain. You learn the textbook of silence in that kind of society without even noticing it yourself. Yet it doesn't mean you wouldn't recognize the free world as a different and a better place if you just have the chance to live in it like I did. Nowadays, people supporting democratic values in Russia don't watch TV anymore, and some of them say the propaganda is worse than it was during the Soviet years. But you are not going to see people there rallying for free media. They are not allowed to. There hasn't ever been a tradition for free media, so the majority of the people don't actually even long for it. It doesn't mean they wouldn't choose that option if they ever had the chance to live in a country where freedom of expression is at least somehow established. After that, they might also storm to the barricades and defend that freedom no matter what. But there's no tradition for that, and the new order is going to make sure that it'll never occur in a large scale. Instead, Russia has another kind of tradition, silencing those who disagree with authorities. They also have a habit for propaganda and for brainwashing the masses, and they use this weapon during the war and during the peace constantly. The purpose is to create an alternative reality with a bunch of imaginary enemies, with the purpose to secure the power of the ruling class. Today, that class is FSB, topped by a small group of former KGB men. The imaginary reality is needed to justify their invasions and military expenses that are going to consume 33% of the state budget in the next 2 years, at the same time as most of the citizens are extremely poor. It's needed to prevent that truth comes to light, exposing their dirty money and corruption, the money they've robbed from the people, their chance for a better future, higher life expectancy, better health, better education, lower rates in sexually transmitted diseases. That fiction is also created to whitewash their own past in the KGB, and therefore they need to revive the Soviet Union and its heroes like Stalin, because otherwise they would be lost. The public face of this ruling circle is the president himself, a third-generation KGB man. The freedom of press became even more limited when Putin returned to presidency. The amount of counterintelligence has exploded. FSB has bigger budgets than ever, and the official state budget for propaganda is now sky high. No wonder these experts of psychological manipulation fooled you. For West, modern image of evil is Osama bin Laden, not a white, blue-eyed man wearing a suit and a tie. He and his cronies don't wear national costumes representing otherness. They don't look like terrorists. They are not Arabs, Muslims, or black. And that's why West was so certain they wanted to be like us. You never expected China to be that way, but Russia you were certain of, even though the signs of the opposite development have been visible for years. It wasn't until the invasion of Ukraine that the Eastern countries started to talk about Russia as an imperialistic country. It took all these years to get these definitions into Western discourse, even though Eastern European countries have been trying to get rid of colonialistic traces of Soviet Union for past 20 years, Russia actively harnessing this process. We on the eastern border of Russia have learned it takes ages to become a subject in the Western discourse, and therefore this Eastern European decolonization process haven't really got Western eyes. Even though Western countries understand that slavery is one of the reasons behind the problems many countries have in Africa, they expected Eastern Europe to become modern democracies in an instant. It's simply because the West didn't recognize the colonialistic nature of Soviet occupation, and due to that, it did not recognize the process when Russia returned to its practice. Naturally, those in power in Moscow are aware of this. They rely on Western ignorance, and they saw what happened to Germany after the Second World War. They knew the best thing to do was to deny the past atrocities, create an imaginary reality where bad things never existed, only glory to Stalin. In the West, we think we can create a better future by learning from mistakes we've made. In Russia, the policy is the opposite. And coming to terms with the past, in that way the process is interpreted in the West, is a sign of weakness. Guilt is not part of Russian new patriotism. On the contrary, history teaching is not to be based on facts, but on ideas rousing national pride, literally. It's based on ethnification and superiority of one ethnic group, Russians, and imperialism, which is now considered the only possible form of government. The West left this type of values behind ages ago, and that's another reason for Western blindness. The new Russian values are too opposite to our postmodern world. It's almost like looking back to Western imperialistic past, except that we wouldn't take that path anymore, or could you here imagine France certainly heading to conquer Africa? No, you wouldn't. And here lies the wisdom of KGB thinking. When lies are big enough, they'll always pass. When ideas are far enough from the Western understanding, they become invisible in the West. You can only identify ideas you recognize, and that's why you wouldn't have let Gestapo-trained men fool you. Thanks to the movies, thanks to books, thanks to German guilt and defeat, Gestapo is the historical symbol for evil you know. I say, a group of KGB men bluffed you because you can see more movies about CIA than KGB. You read more books related to CIA or Gestapo than KGB. It's not a symbol for evil for you, thanks to Russian policy of denying their past and closing archives. Therefore, you have believed their fiction, imitations of friendship and democracy, and welcomed their dirty money warmly, even though it made Western political decisions less independent. It's better late than never, but let the new Russia be a lesson for West of how important it is to come to terms with the past and condemn also past human rights crimes and hold organizations accountable for them. If that had been done to KGB, you wouldn't have trusted a government ruled by KGB men. Thank you.